This is a fan-generated show. If you would like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com, and also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Hi, I'm Charles Jacobs, President of Americans for Peace and Tolerance, here in Boston. Many people have asked me why so many in the Jewish community are so far left, and they cling to the left even when, these days, it is the left that's mostly anti-Israel and even anti-Jewish. Well, people have written books about this topic. I would need an hour to begin to explain it, and I plan to do that one day on a different program. But for today's Charles Jacobs moment, I want to show you just how bad the problem has become. We now have Reform rabbis and progressive rabbis colluding with the Islamist enemies of the Jews. Radical Muslims here in Boston are telling leftist rabbis that Jews need to ally with them, you see, because Trump is anti-Semitic, they say. Look at Steve Bannon, they say. Look at the alt-right, they say. And Trump hates us too because, they say, look at the Muslim ban. So, you may find this hard to believe, my friends, but in Lexington, Massachusetts, last July, a rabbi invited representatives of 3 radical Muslim groups to his temple to make their case. And when they were done, this rabbi allowed them to raise money from the Jews. So Jewish money from Lexington, Massachusetts goes to a group linked to Hamas, which murders Jews in Israel. Watch now.
In Jewish folklore, the city of Helm was inhabited by foolish but well-meaning Jewish wise men who cooked up the dumbest schemes imaginable and whose antics kept Jews amused for generations.
Shalom, I'm Rabbi Howard Jaffe.
This is Rabbi Howard Jaffe from Temple Isaiah in Lexington, Massachusetts.
Eternal One, we know you by many different names. Allah, Adonai, the Holy Spirit.
On July 25th, 2017, Temple Isaiah of Lexington hosted a well-meaning community event titled Out of Many One, full of nice-sounding words. The good Rabbi Jaffe welcomed to his synagogue 3 Muslim leaders, one from a group called CARE, another from the Muslim Justice League, and one from a Boston mosque called the Islamic Society of Boston Cultural Center, ISBCC. In his enthusiasm to make the world a better place, it seemed the rabbi chose to ignore the problematic nature of these organizations. CARE, it turns out, is a Hamas front group. The Muslim Justice League campaigns to stop the FBI's anti-terror efforts. The ISBCC has been controlled by radicals for a long time.
At some stage, we have to accept reality, which is a number of people who have taken up arms against Americans, either here in Boston or abroad with ISIS, have an affiliation with that mosque.
The Islamic Society of Boston Cultural Center, or ISBCC, is a controversial Saudi-funded mega-mosque. Most of its worshippers are peaceful and well-meaning members. However, many of the mosque's leaders and trustees have long-standing links to radical Islam and terrorism. In fact, the organization which runs the mosque, the Muslim American Society, or MAS for short, has been identified by federal prosecutors as the overt arm of the Muslim Brotherhood in America. Yusuf al-Qaradawi was one of the original trustees of the Boston Mosque. He is also the spiritual leader of the extremist Muslim Brotherhood.
A dozen members of the ISBCC have been connected to terrorist activities.
They are murderers, inciters to violence, and subversives, including the perpetrators of the massacre at the Boston Marathon in 2013.
Radical preachers continue to lecture at the mosque, now as part of an official Islamic seminary curriculum that will create a new generation of radicalized Muslim youth. Moreover, preachers and guest speakers at the ISBCC mosque have incited hatred and called for America's destruction.
Because I'm in a jihad straight up. The world is in the condition that we are right now presently because we refuse to obey God, and we want to put the Constitution, this one nation over God, and you feel that you're a great nation now, America. This nation, by God, will be brought to its knees. We should not allow the FBI to have access to our masajid and centers. As an agency, I think this organization is sitting on the precipice of evil.
Grab onto the shovel, grab onto the gun and the sword. Don't be afraid to step out into this world and do your job.
At Temple Isaiah, the guest speakers had a different message for the congregation. Perhaps it was what the congregation wanted to hear. A feel-good fantasy about religion, including how it liberates people from the evils of the modern world.
Islam is what liberates me from materialism, liberates me from individualism, liberates me from capitalism, liberation from so many other ills of society.
The CARE leader assured the audience not to be concerned about the threat from radical Islam, with a series of lies.
Of course, 0% of Muslims are doing violence in the greater Boston area. I would argue that 0% of Muslims are doing violence in America at large. And it turns out that CARE isn't Muslim Brotherhood. I mean, the Muslim Brotherhood doesn't really exist in this country. Muslim Brotherhood in America doesn't exist. There's no political Islam.
According to the Anti-Defamation League, CARE and its founders were part of a group set up by the Muslim Brotherhood to support Hamas. CARE officials have encouraged members of the Muslim community to refuse to cooperate with law enforcement agencies, including the FBI investigating terrorism. The FBI suspended its relationship with CARE precisely because of its ties to Hamas, and in order to prevent CARE from publicly exploiting any relations it had with the FBI. Rabbi Jaffe's community event provided a Jewish cover for CARE. The Hamas charter itself calls for the murder of every Jew on earth, which would include the rabbi's entire congregation. As befitting the wise men of Helm, at the closing of the event, Rabbi Jaffe allowed Hamas-connected CARE to solicit funds from his congregation.
Go out and donate to any Muslim organization, ISBCC, CARE, Jetpack, Muslim Justice League. Come on, donate to us.
My project this year is I have to raise $1 million. Don't send clothes, send money.
Astonishingly, the rabbi and his congregation seem to be supportive of the fundraising appeal by the Hamas-linked group. What would cause highly educated and well-intentioned people in the Jewish community to do such an outrageous thing?
This liberal paradigm that we are all good people, and that if we're only nice to other people, they'll be nice to us, is more than just an intellectual commitment, it's an emotional commitment. I don't want to believe that you are so malevolent that I have to fight you. And as a result, when you meet people who might be bad people, you can't afford to identify them.
That's the good Jew. The Jew who helps everyone else. The Jew who puts others before themselves. The Jew who cares more about strangers than they do about family.
It's an overwhelming concern about personally being a moral person and really not caring about the consequences outside of one's own solipsistic concerns. The world is a messy place, but for moral narcissists, the key thing is I want to feel good about myself.
Many well-intentioned rabbis are seduced by the promise of interfaith dialogue to bring Muslims and Jews together. and by the pleasure of showcasing their own moral virtue. Sadly, too often, naive and hopeful rabbis embrace radicals who use interfaith efforts to promote a political agenda that is dangerously detrimental to the Jewish community and the American public. Radical Muslims know their rabbis all too well. Rabbi Jaffe was one of their first Boston area recruits. He won't be their last. The foolish antics of the wise men of Helm were amusing. The foolish actions of today's well-intentioned, morally confused rabbis are dangerous. The Jewish community is suffering from a great divide. One side accepts our daunting reality and is prepared to deal with it. The other side chooses to deny the threats and instead promotes feel-good delusions.
Well, that was pretty hard-hitting, and who knows how they will react. But you know, before we made that video, we published articles in Jewish papers criticizing what happened at the Lexington Temple as a warning. We don't want that to happen again. And then we sent the articles to the rabbi's congregation so that they could learn the truth about who had actually been invited to their house of worship. And then we also asked people to call the temple office and complain politely about what the rabbi did. Do you know what happened? Do you think that the leaders of the Jewish community chided the rabbi and demanded that he never do that again? No. The Massachusetts Board of Rabbis and the Jewish Community Relations Council together issued a statement condemning me and my organization, Americans for Peace and Tolerance. The statement said things about me that were very untrue. Things that might actually incite Muslims to do me physical harm. The statement, in a way, is a sort of Jewish fatwa. But guess what? Most Jews, even in far-left liberal Boston, do not want money to go to Hamas-linked groups. And they're beginning to fight back. So stay tuned. We're not going away. This is Charles Jacobs.